We turn now to another tragic story about a young man who learned the hard way about the troubles plaguing America's criminal justice system. Kalief Browder was arrested at 16, never convicted of a crime, never had a trial, but spent more than 3 years in one of the most violent jails in the country. Tonight, here is Kalief in his own words.
You're supposed to be innocent to prove guilty, but the way the system is you're guilty till proven innocent.
Little did we know Kalief Browder was already dying inside the day we met him. At the easy age of 22, he'd already learned more about America's criminal justice system and endured more than any soul should ever have to. That's Kalief there on the floor inside Rikers Island, New York City's most notorious jail, beaten by a gang of fellow inmates, all caught on camera. At the age of 16, he was arrested and sent here for allegedly stealing a backpack.
It was like hell on earth. We were beaten, stomped by the correction officers, and they was just beating on me.
Beatings captured on surveillance video obtained by the New Yorker magazine, which first brought Kalief's story to light. In this video, we see him being escorted to the prison shower. He appears to speak to the guard, who in seconds is seen slamming him into a wall and then to the ground.
And I cried myself to sleep because it's like, I want to go home, and it's like they're not letting me go home.
To go home, Kalief's mother, Vanita Browder, needed to post bail of $3,000. Money, she said, she just didn't have.
What was your reaction when you heard that your 16-year-old boy was being sent to Rikers Island?
My heart dropped. You know, I had heard so many horror stories about Rikers, and all I could picture was him getting hurt in there.
Court records show Kalief had attempted suicide at least 6 times, spent 1,110 days behind bars, more than 800 of those in solitary confinement. His court date postponed more than 30 times. He endured all this having never been given a trial, never convicted of a crime. Finally, in June of 2013, all charges against Kalief were dismissed. But his experience exposed a troubled criminal justice system and the brutality of life behind bars.
I think at some point, almost a reckless disregard by the prosecutors in this case. They didn't care, Byron. They saw his file, they saw that he was in jail, and he'd probably take a plea, and they were hoping he'd take a plea.
The judge told me that if I plead guilty, I would release from jail that same day, but I didn't do it. You're not gonna make me say I did something just so I could go home.
When we first met him, November of last year, he was doing better, he said. Earned his GED, started classes at Bronx Community College, pulling a 3.56 GPA. But the psychological trauma from jail had taken its toll.
And when he first came home, he would just walk the 4 corners of the driveway.
You hear animals do that have been confined to a space.
Yes, he did it. And I had to watch my baby go through all of that.
In the last year, Kalief grew depressed, deeply paranoid.
You know, deep down, I'm a mess. I feel like I'm a grown, old man.
And then 2 Saturdays ago, 2 years after his release from jail, Kalief Browder hanged himself with an air conditioner cord in his home in the Bronx. He was 22.
I didn't know what to do. Can you imagine finding your son and he's hanging with his head back?
Kalief's death made national news, and messages of outrage mixed with sympathy flooded social media. John Legend wrote in an op-ed that New York failed Kalief. Lena Dunham Instagrammed his photo and called for reform. Our interview with Kalief went viral on Facebook. What we now know is that Kalief was due in court to face new charges of disorderly conduct the week he took his own life. His family said he was scared to go back into jail. By now, the beatings he endured in Rikers had been seen millions of times online.
What did Rikers do to your son?
It destroyed him. It destroyed him mentally.
Has anyone apologized to you from Rikers?
No.
From the prosecutor's office?
No.
What do you hope happens now?
I want them to be responsible, to admit that it was their fault that my son is dead. He spent 3 years in hell.
It sounds like you're in that hell now.
I will be in hell until the day I die because I found my son hanging. If your child is murdered, you have an immediate anger towards that person, and you want that person found, you know, and pay for what they did to your child. It's not one person, it's a whole system that destroyed my son. and I want them all to pay.
I deeply wish we hadn't lost him, but he did not die in vain.
New York did away with solitary confinement for 16 and 17-year-olds. Plans were announced to fix crowded dockets in courts to ensure the right to a speedy trial. There are also calls for change to the cash bail system. Currently, only 12% of defendants in New York City make bail.
We're in a quest for justice right now, Byron.
Paul Prestia, who helped Kalief file his civil suit against the city, says it's not enough.
Reforms are all nice and well, but admit you did something wrong here, because that was always Kalief's message. How many young men have to go through this?
99% of the critics that talk all that junk, I promise you, they wouldn't have the courage to do the job that the correction officers do.
Bernie Carrick knows the system from both sides. The former chief of the New York City Police Department, he also ran Rikers Island for years. And as a convicted felon, he spent time in solitary confinement.
As someone that spent 60 days inside solitary confinement, it creates paranoia, it makes you insane.
But he cautions the city against bowing to public pressure and implementing changes, he says, that could put Rikers correction officers and inmates in danger.
If you take solitary confinement away from the correction officials, you're going to see a major, major increase in violence. These are kids that come from gangs. These are kids that ran the streets. I think is very dangerous.
So what would you do? What would your suggestions to improve Rikers Island?
I think you keep that. You charge the staff that violate the law, and they're locked up.
It's not hard to imagine the life he might have led if he had made it.
I have the medal hanging on my bed.
You see it in the remnants of the life and the people he left behind, like Elizabeth Payams, a program director at Bronx Community College who worked closely with Kalief.
Granted his associate's degree.
She says she's working on getting Kalief his associate degree posthumously.
It's for you.
Thank you so much.
What do you want the world to remember of your son?
To remember him for the stand-up person that he was. He was a good person.
The kind of person who turned down a plea bargain on principle, whose story may help save others like him.
If I would have just been played guilty, then my story would have never been heard. Nobody would have took the time to listen to me. I'd have been just another criminal.
Our thanks to producer Katie Yu.